Welcome to the DRF Sports Podcast, brought to you by DRF Sports. America's most trusted name in horse racing is now providing sports bettors with exclusive data, analytics, previews, videos, and expert picks on all major sports. Bet smarter and have more fun doing it. It's the DRF Sports Podcast, and now your host, Sheldon Alexander. Ready, set, bet.
This is the DRF Sports Podcast, episode 79. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Sheldon Alexander. And the conference finals are underway in the NBA, and we had both home teams win, while both road teams kind of came out a little flat after some crazy game sevens. We split the game one picks on Monday's pod, bringing our total so far to 34-26 against the spread in the play-in/playoffs and 46-30-1 against the spread overall for my NBA picks given out on this pod. More on that in a sec. But first, hey Iowa, DRF Sportsbook is sending all parlays to the moon. Start cashing in with DRF Sportsbook's 22% profit boost for all MLB, NBA, or NHL parlays. The MLB season is here, and along with the NBA playoffs and the NHL Stanley Cup Playoffs, so it's time to celebrate, and we want to boost your profits. So head over to the DRF Sportsbook now and start betting. Must be physically present in Iowa to wager. So coming up, we got a recap of both game ones in the NBA conference finals, as well as hitting you with some game picks for game two in each of those series. Our guy, Matt Russell, stops by with a deep dive into the NHL playoffs, including a recap of a super lit game one of the Battle of Alberta. So much to break down on this episode of the DRF Sports Pod. And luckily for y'all, that starts right about now. And so we've got home teams holding court in the conference finals. Luka holding court on the patio. Just joking. I know it's old. I'm just joking. And the Battle of Alberta holding the hearts and minds of us all here in Canada. And of course, our guy, Matt Russell, is here to break that all down and more. Save the beers in the patio maybe for later, though. My first question, though, have you recovered from last night, my dude?
Oh, man. Whew. I was so close. I was so close to getting just an oblivious full night's sleep. That game, it goes 5-1. I'm like, okay, that's it. That's a wrap for your boy. We're gonna hit the sack, go through the motions, right? You're brushing the teeth, all of that sort of thing. And you know what kept me in the game? Flip the TV on in the bedroom and Seinfeld episode with Terry Hatcher, their real and their spectacular episode comes on. And shout out to mid-early 90s Terry Hatcher right now, because I'm in for watching the rest of that episode. There's only maybe 10 minutes left in it. And so that kept me basically awake for another 10 minutes. And then I just flipped over to the game basically as a last second before I turn this TV off type situation. And it was 6-4. And it's it was 5-1 10 minutes ago. What are we doing here? Terry Hatcher. I don't know, how long was I watching that episode for? I mean, I could watch it forever. So at 6-4, it's man, there's a lot of time left in this game. Now I have to stay with it. And then Edmonton scores again to make it 6-5. And now it's well, now I'm in for the third period here, right? We can't get out of this. And of course, Edmonton ties it at 6. And yeah, long story short, I'm exhausted. And good news is I've got about 12 hours of just sitting on my couch and watching golf ahead of me here, and doing a little work as well. So maybe not necessarily the patio today. That feels like a weekend thing, long weekend coming up here in Canada. So we'll get plenty of that done in the meantime.
Yes, lots to get to, of course, whether it's a patio, whether it's a Battle of Alberta, and of course, whether it's the NBA conference finals, which is why we're here to break it all down. Some housekeeping off the top, of course, 1-1 record off of last Monday's pod, 34-26 against the spread record, 34-26 in English against the spread record in the play-in/playoffs, 46-30-1 against the spread overall for the NBA picks given out on this podcast. And as we continue, with game one. We'll come right off of game one of last night's action. And I got to say, I'm mad at myself for picking the Mavs in game one. Of course, this is going to be hindsight.
Right.
Happens, right?
Yeah.
112-87 Warriors dominate the Mavs, take a 1-0 lead. Game two goes Friday night. Golden State favored by 6.5. And as mentioned, I'm going to be on the Warriors because I'm mad at myself for taking the Mavs in game one. And the reason is because most of what happened at the end of the Mavs Suns series was more of an indictment of the Suns that I might have given credit to, as opposed to what Luka and the Mavs did to said Suns. I'm not saying the series is over. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, I thought Golden State was going to win the series. Said that on last pod. I said I wouldn't be surprised if the Mavs won. Well, after watching game one, I'm not going to say I'm swayed and Warriors are going to sweep them, but I don't think the Mavs can win the series. I just think the Mavs, of course, there's a bit of a letdown coming off such a high of game 7 on the road, and then you're traveling, and then, you come into this game and you're just flat. But a couple things here. The Warriors, to me, just seemed way better prepared. Like, their game plan for this just seemed way better than the Mavs game plan was, in terms of, I feel like not only did the Warriors know what they were going to do in terms of, we're going to sick Wiggins on Luka, which is something that we talked about on Monday's pod. Have him just ride Luka the whole way up the floor, and then you're just shading Luka. And if those other guys are going to hit shots, they're going to hit shots. And they did not hit shots in game one. Now, for them to win, that means that those guys will need to hit shots four games for that to happen. Forget about what Luka does. Luka's going to do what Luka does. Cool. Luka and Steph, if they wash, cool. Comes down to the other guys. Are those other dudes going to hit shots 4 games? I don't think so. They might hit shots 2 games. And I mean, hit enough shots to win, right? Like, yeah. So that's the first thing I'll say. The other part, the flip side of that, is what the Mavs tried to do to the Warriors. And they tried to chase the Warriors off the line. But the problem is the Warriors were ready for that. If you watch the Warriors offense, they had no problem driving to the basket and just taking layups, because there's little to no rim protection at all from the Dallas Mavericks. And the Warriors were fine to move the ball around and just take the layups, take the ball movement, trust the extra pass. It's almost like you're playing right into the Warriors' hands. They tried to double Steph on the double teams, and hey, you had Draymond. Draymond's whole job on the offense is to make that extra pass. They did that super easy. So what is the adjustment that the Mavs could possibly make? Well, not double teaming Steph, maybe just switching the screens and trying to play that out. Cool. I just think there's more ways for the Warriors to score consistently, even if the shots aren't falling. Right. But on the Mavs side of it, I just don't see that as being a thing. That's just me. That's just, do I see the series going 6 still? Like, the Warriors win. Like, I see the series going 6. Cool. Yeah. You could talk me, like, if the Warriors 1-5, would I be here being like, oh, I'm stunned? I just think, like, I don't know. I know there's people out here. Obviously, it's one of the top sports podcasts there are. I don't know if you heard Simmons and Russillo, but they're doing a draft of, like, the players in this series before game one. And they were taking, like, they're taking like Jalen Brunson over like Klay Thompson and stuff. And I'm just like, what is going on right now? Right. It's just like the drunk off of what happened in the Mavs and Suns series, as opposed to just being like the Mavs or the Suns just didn't show up. And I mean, I know it sounds like I'm overreacting to game one. Totally get that. Totally cool with that. No. Totally get that. Totally cool with that. Yeah. But like the Mavs, I wasn't a believer in the Mavs. You know that from time. Well, we're here. I'm just not a believer in the Warriors. That part too, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, obviously, it does sound like an overreaction, right? Because, like, you were talking about 7, Warriors and 7. I think the Mavs. Nothing really changed for me from a Mavs standpoint, to be honest with you. This is exactly what happened in not just the first game, but the first 2 games with Dallas and Phoenix, right? Like, I don't know what the explanation is, and you obviously did a really good job of breaking down like the X and O type elements to this, but I'm not smart enough to know what the adjustment game to game is. But if what happened in Phoenix and Dallas, every second game or every 2 games, I should say, like, there was an adjustment there. Now maybe the ball movement. I guess my one issue would be the ball movement makes like a Steph Curry less vulnerable to wearing down the same way that Chris Paul did. And that would be sort of the concern level. But I'm going to need to see more than one game to sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater type of situation here. Totally. And now we have this point spread going up to 6.5. And like, that's a 1.5 adjustment off of one game. And like, that is sort of cardinal rule in sports betting. And like what we talk about like every week is like, take advantage of those adjustments when you can. And so that 6.5 point spread, like that looks that looks really familiar. It looks the same as the point spreads against the Nuggets, as the point spreads against the Grizzlies. Mm-hmm. And again, it just kind of comes down to the question that you posed, right? Like, are we discrediting the Suns so hard, or almost like we're actually giving them credit in a weird way, like they had to have just completely no-showed? Now, again, like the idea of a no-show, especially in a game
which 7, they did,
which they did, but like they also stunk, right? Like there's kind of two different, like there's no showing. Like no showing to me is sort of like you just didn't care, right? Versus just like stinking out loud. And I just find it hard to believe that the Suns just did not care. Like I have to still give credit to the Mavs for doing something over the course of that series to get to a point where, and I said like the reason I didn't bet on the Suns in game 7, despite all the other home game results, was the result of game 6. Like to me, that was the biggest issue, is like, oh my God, like maybe Phoenix isn't that team because they didn't take care of business in game 6. And so,
which is something we talked about all the time though, right? Like going into game 6, like if you're serious about life, you win that game 6 on the road.
Yes. Yeah. Which means, okay, I can't support you in game 7 because you should have taken care of business in game 6. All that is to say, like game 1, whether it's against Utah, whether, you know what I mean? Like whether it's against Phoenix, like, I mean, the hindsight obviously to me is more like, oh, we should have known Dallas was going to lose game 1 because like they lost game 1 in both those other series and still, you know, took care of business eventually. So
I know what you're saying.
That's the hindsight. The hindsight isn't like a complete radical reconstruction of the handicap, right? Now, maybe again, the reconstruction and the change comes from just being like, okay, I don't think they can wear down Steph because I think they, but I'm not there yet. And now that we have an extra 1.5 on the point spread, like I have to get back in. Like I think this Dallas team, and you know, again, most of that being Luka and everything that he does around him. And again, Jason Kidd, okay, like we're touch and go with him. Like maybe he has adjustments that are very specific to the point guard position, but like that would involve Steph Curry. And so I just look at it and I go, okay, we're getting a 1.5. I don't know if they're going to cover or not. I'm just saying, like, anytime we get a 1.5 that we probably shouldn't, or that we didn't, you know, people had plenty of time to weigh in after game 1 on that point spread and bang that thing up to 6.5. But no, it stayed at 5. And maybe that was just, you know, sportsbooks keeping it at 5 and letting people, you know, take the Warriors for whatever reason. But like the point is like there wasn't a ton of action going for the Warriors. And so, you know, I haven't seen the shot quality numbers. I'll be interested to see what those look like. You know, again, we're not watching that game closely enough to be like, oh, Mavs like had the shots, they just didn't make them. Yeah. Obviously, things got out of hand in that third quarter, like a classic Warriors third quarter. And so it's hard to sort of tell, okay, there's so much time left in that game. And it was, you know, pretty much a blowout midway through the third. And you go, okay, I can't really add anything up from the entire game versus when the Warriors beat the Grizz to close them out. We saw, okay, like that all happened in the last 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. So that game was played in a neutral state for like 43 minutes. This one was played in a neutral state for like, what, 30? Like not even that, right?
Yeah. So in the post game, all the talk, whether it was whoever spoke from the Mavs, Jason Kidd for sure, it kind of repeated the same thing. We got the shots that we wanted to get. We just didn't hit them. Do you know what I mean? And so the shots were there. They just didn't fall. Right. Which is like cool. And that's a modern thing we hear a lot and see a lot in these NBA playoffs, which, you know, did the 3-pointers go in or did they not go in? And that's the thing. So that's the first part, right? That's exactly what I was talking about in terms of this just coming down to, can those guys hit shots? And you know, the reality,
and it's why we have shot quality. It's why we have metrics, because we can't believe what these guys are peddling to us on a game-to-game basis, right? We need neutral observers to be like, yeah, the shots actually were there, or they're not, right? You know, so.
And it's tough, right? And you know, watching the game and the Warriors game plan of, you know, they were very you could tell part of the game plan was to help and recover. So you're sagging into the paint, trying to contest the drive, make sure you get out to the 3-point line. And you're going to see the highlight over and over again of Draymond getting out and blocking a 3-point shot and getting all fired up, because that's clearly part of the game plan, right? Can you sag in the lane to help off of Luka, right? And they're going to try to give those guys shots and get back. And, you know, that sounds easier said than done, because I'm a firm believer that defense is effort, and you can tell me differently, but no. But I'm saying, like, the general consensus of, like, people talking about basketball think like this guy's good at defense, this guy's bad at defense. Like, everyone is super athletic in the NBA, right? It's effort, mindset, and coaching, right? So you watch what the Warriors did, and it's okay. We're going to pester Luka. We're going to help off Luka. And then can we retreat back and defend the 3-point line? So those guys' shots, yes, they're the shots that you wanted to get, but they're probably a little more contested than you're used to. Do you know what I mean? And it becomes a difficult thing to kind of like put a stat to. Like, I know there is a stat for that. I get that, but I'm saying, like, a contested shot for Steph Curry or Klay Thompson is different than a contested shot for.
But that's what shot quality does. That's what shot quality does, right?
Like, they literally. Though. Do you know what I mean? Like, those two.
No, and that's what shot quality does, right? They literally evaluate the per player, like what that player individually does. That's why those numbers are so valuable, right? And again, I'm saying this not knowing what the results actually are yet. It could be a shot quality victory by the Warriors by 20. It could be a shot quality victory by the Warriors by 5. Who knows, right? Could even be a Dallas shot quality victory, right? The point is, from a predictive standpoint, like, we need to know, okay, like, if there's a hand up in Davis Bertans' face on a shot, or even if Davis Bertans, by the way, is wide ass open, right? Like, either way, like, that's graded differently than when the same situation is happening to Steph Curry, right?
For sure.
Like, I just want to sort of clear that up, because this isn't just like, was X player, you know, blind face, you know, open. This is a player to player metric, right? Like, this stuff needs to be heated in the way that you're suggesting that it should be, right?
And I think, though, when that comes down to it, right, it's like the game plan from the Mavs now on the flip side was to chase off the line. But the Warriors were ready for that. Whereas I think the Mavs were just on some, we're going to take this 3. And the adjustments that you're talking about that I'm interested to see as well, I'm very interested, because I feel like the longer the series goes and Looney is still playing, the worse things are for the Mavs. Right. Because I'm stunned. I was stunned that Looney was playing that much to begin with, because I thought, okay, he wouldn't be able to play. The Mavs are going to, like, play him off the floor. He's just going to get put in the Luka cooker and be on Luka Island, and they're going to play him out of the game. But he was able to play most of the time somehow, like, or play his regular load of minutes. And so until that adjustment is made where the Warriors go small, like, they're kind of still one up in this series. And for Luka, one thing I will say, like, you know, he's grabbing his shoulder already during the game in game 1. And it's like, oh, okay, Luka. All right. So we're here again. We're doing this again. All right, cool. Grabbing the shoulder already in game 1. But I will say, I think that I'm not worried about Luka from a point output standpoint. I know he only scored 20, but I also think that a lot of what he does, and this is kind of like going back to a LeBron thing that we talked about, you take the first game to kind of see what the defense is doing. Do you know what I mean? To see how the defense is playing you, see how they're going to react to you going over the screen. Are they going over? Are they going under? So, like, I'm not overreacting to Luka's performance. I think Luka is going to get his. I'm more reacting to the other dudes and, like, okay, so this whole, like, 2-day love affair we had with Spencer Dinwiddie is now gone back to, okay, he's Spencer Dinwiddie for a reason, right? Like, that's more where I'm at. Yeah. But hey, from the series standpoint, we'll regroup. We'll discuss again on Monday. We'll obviously be at game 3. We'll be past game 3 on Monday. So that'll be super interesting to see where we lie there. But yeah, I'm totally totally can't see the Mavs winning this series, and maybe that's an overreaction, but we shall see. As we go to the Eastern Conference, I'm definitely not overreacting here. And, the Miami Heat win, even though we're on the Miami Heat to win said game. They do that 118 to 107. Jimmy Buckets putting in some work with 41 points for Jimmy Butler, which, I mean, is a big time performance for him. We go to game two. Game two goes tonight, and we have the Heat favored by 3.5 points in that game. I look at that and I really want to lean on the Heat again, but I just can't because I see the series going extended. So I have to be on the Celtics in this game, Celtics plus 3.5. And as we go back to what happened in game one, biggest factor, obviously, no Marcus Smart and Al Horford in health and safety protocols, which I didn't even know health and safety protocols were a thing for games in Florida. Right?
Yeah,
I thought Florida stopped doing that like a year ago, right? Like without getting too far into that side of things, but so no Marcus Smart, no Al Horford. That's 2 starters, right? So you add that to the fact that Boston is coming off of this hard-fought game 7, a physical game 7, and now you have to play game 1 against a super physical Miami Heat team without 2 of your starters. Miami's supposed to win that game, right? We're not going to make too much out of that. Jason Tatum, 21 in the first half, tied a career high for points in the first half. Boston led by as many as 13 in that first half, and then second half, all Miami. I mean, 22-2 run. Miami, 39-14, third quarter advantage. Jimmy Butler, 27 in the second half. The Heat remain undefeated at home in the playoffs, a complete turnaround in the second half. My question to you, though, and I know this might sound weird, but are the Heat better off with Gabe Vincent playing at 100% than Kyle Lowry playing at, I don't know, 70% or whatever he was at?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like we've talked about this, like you talked about it last week. So I'm just going off basically what you told us last week in that you're just like, I don't want Kyle Lowry out there hobbled around, right? You compared it to Fred VanVleet against Philadelphia. Like, I'd rather Gabe Vincent. I'm like, but are we sure even Gabe Vincent's any good? And so again, I don't even really know the answer to that question necessarily, but like, listen, if we want to get deeper into it, right? Like when people were objecting to the idea of Kyle Lowry leaving Toronto, I'm like, you got to get, and I was way early on it, like too early on it, I should say. Like you can't just spend your entire career being undersized, a portion of that career being out of shape, and just taking charges your entire life. And like just, cannonballing yourself around the court the entire time and not think that it's just going to fall right off the cliff. Right. And so the Raptors did a nice job of getting out of that as sort of fast as they possibly could. And so, the point is like,
I still have, it still haunts me that there were rumors of them potentially getting Tyrese Maxey, and that just didn't happen because Kyle didn't want to go to Philly, and
that
still hurts my feelings. I can't.
That would be problematic. But you and I were on Miami in game 1 at -2. You had 24 hours out there to bet it at -2. It goes up to -4.5 upon those injury, etc. Announcements. The line closes -4.5. So quickly we get to write down in our notebook, okay, Smart and Horford combined mean 2.5 to the point spread. Now, what do they actually mean in a game, and how much of what happened in game 1 do you want to attribute to those guys being out? Because a couple of things here, right? One, the Celtics won 3 out of 4 quarters. It just unfortunately was a complete horror show in that third quarter where they lose that quarter by 25 points. But you're not going to win a ton by a ton of games when you lose a quarter by 25 points. And was Smart and Horford, and the requirement of the Celtics to have to go deeper down the bench, the reason that third quarter happened? Or was it just kind of variance, right? Did just the shots happen to fall in that third quarter or not fall in the case of Boston? Which brings me to our favorite element. The second thing, the shot quality. And this was a shot quality upset. Based on shot quality, the human beings, the individuals who took the shots and how open they were and the quality of those shots, the Celtics should have won the game. I think it was 105, 103, something along those lines. That's correct. Yeah, 105, 103. So and then we compare it to the actual score. Well, the actual score was 107, 118. So 105 to 107. Okay, the Celtics got what they should have got out of their offense, right? Like they didn't miss any more shots than they should have, or maybe one less shot.
Yeah.
The outlier situation was the Heat, right? So the Heat were, the outlier in that they made all of the shots, right? So the tougher the shot, they made it. So is that something that we can see going forward to game 2? Now, I don't know what the status is of Smart, and I don't know what the status is of Horford. Maybe you can sort of give us an update on that sort of deal for either of those guys, but the line's down to 3.5.
Yeah.
And so that means one of two things. One, either one of those players is going to come back and play, and we've adjusted back down to 1 point, because I would sort of say, based on what we've seen from when Smart was out of other games, he's probably closer to 1.5 or 2 of those 2.5 points. And Horford being out, for all of the excitement over how well he played against the Bucks, he's probably only worth 0.5 point on a game-to-game basis. And so, so option 1 is one of those guys is back and it's 3.5, or option 2 is just the element of the shot quality, right? So again, the people who are betting significantly are relying on these metrics. It's why we bring these up, because we can talk about narratives and do all of that sort of thing. And that helps us in a lot of ways, create a bet. But when we're talking about lines and how they get put into place, this is the stuff it's based off of, right? Yeah. The assumption here is that the Celtics are going to have this bounce back type performance, or even, it's not even really bounce back, because they played well enough in game 1 to win, creating shots and preventing good shots from Miami, or good enough shots from Miami. And so when we look at this game, I just go, this is a Celtics team, again, obviously injuries being what they were, but this is still a team that we were like minus 175 for the series. Like, that seems excessive. But you and I were looking at this game 1 going like, we're not really looking to weigh in on the series just yet. We want to watch one game. And I talked about how Miami -2 was sort of the like uncontroversial, the safe bet, if you will, because that sort of, doesn't put us on one side or another, just goes, yeah, Miami's going to kind of hold serve here in game 1, which they did. But we have this one game, and we have this information that the Celtics, even without Smart and Horford, probably should have won the game based on shot quality. Now, again, if Miami's making tougher shots, or scoring more points than they should have, you immediately go, well, yeah, it's because the defense wasn't as good. But that's the point of having shot quality, right? Where we get to see, okay, like the defense was good enough to have them only score 103 points.
Yeah.
Miami just didn't, right? Miami just and maybe it was all Jimmy Butler and his 40 points, like making shots and those tough shots, right? But like, again, that's based on an average Jimmy Butler night, and he just had an above average Jimmy Butler night, right? This isn't sort of, versus replacement player type stuff here. So I just look at this and I go, okay, like even without those two guys, and as much as we could easily say, oh man, they met 10 points, they met 15 points in the point spread. Look at how easily, the Heat covered, so to speak. No, right? Like if fundamentally those guys don't mean that much on a game to game basis, right? We saw when Smart was out against the Bucks and that line moved drastically. You know what happened? The Celts won that game relatively easily anyway, right? And so I just look at this and I think this is an opportunity here, not in the same like value way that, like imagine like the Heat winning in this game going up to 5, up to 5.5, like the Warriors series. This is a different thing. I think this is a value opportunity to grab the Celtics here. Plus 120s are available on the series price. I think the money line here is a really good opportunity, whether or not Horford and Smart are in this game. I think this is a chance for the Celtics to even this series and then take it back to Boston, and things will get even more interesting going forward.
Yeah. So as of now, as we're recording this Thursday morning, Horford is unlikely to play as he's still in health and safety protocols. Okay. Marcus Smart is probable to play. Okay. And my assumption is Marcus Smart will play. Like if he's close, he's going to go out there and play. And from the basketball standpoint of it though, like Jimmy Butler, like that's just an extra body to throw at Jimmy Butler, even if it's just for a couple other possessions. Marcus Smart being out there also means that they can switch those screens between Brown, Tatum, and Marcus Smart, so Jimmy Butler, he had moments where Peyton Pritchard's out there and Pritchard's knocking down threes, but on the other end, Butler's just going to hunt him on the other side, right? You're not going to do that as much when it's Marcus Smart. So from a basketball standpoint, yeah, Marcus Smart does matter in that sense, right? Like it's not necessarily like a points, he scores X amount of points as opposed to whoever his guy is. And shot quality, you're right. Like Jimmy Butler just hit super difficult shots that Jimmy Butler hits in the playoffs sometimes. Like that crazy stat of, 40-point games for Jimmy Butler in the playoffs, it's like 5. And in the regular season, it's 0. Right. So it's just like, all right, cool. Sure, Jimmy, sometimes he's just putting the team on his back. Horford is interesting to me because when he comes in, like Bam didn't really do much scoring wise. And I think eventually if the Heat are going to win this series, they need more from Bam scoring wise. And if Bam's not scoring when there is no Al Horford, like scoring against Al Horford and Time Lord, like, I don't know, like that's where I see Miami running into trouble. And then we're talking about what I'm talking about with the Mavs, where is Strus going to hit all those shots, right? 4 times, is Tyler Hero going to come off the bench and give them the boost that he did when they were down early in the first quarter? Tyler Hero came out with that second unit in the middle of the first quarter, kind of bring Miami back because they were down, comfortably early. So there's a lot going on in this series and a lot still to be played out. And I know my viewpoint is complete opposite than it was from the Mavs series, where I'm like, nope, this is what's going on in the Mavs series. This is done. This series, I know there's still a bunch of chess pieces to be moved in this series, and I can't wait to see it all. Like I'm so excited for this series to see how that plays out. But sorry, I interrupted you on one point there. You're going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, you mentioned if Smart's back, right? And so again, we talked about how he shifted, his absence shifted the line against the Bucks. It's like 2 points, something along those lines. So at 3.5 right now, well, that's a 1-point shift. So again, maybe that's the adjustment because it didn't really matter that Marcus Smart wasn't in the lineup in that game, in that one game against the Bucks. Yeah. But if you think that a week and a half ago he was worth 2 points to the point spread, and you're only getting 1 point back, right? And you'll recall this was -2, right? This line was -2. Then you are getting value at this point. Like you are getting value on the Celtics because the line should be back closer to -2 because you can't tell me, like right now you're telling me that Horford is worth 1.5 points, right? With this line going from 2 to 3.5, that can't possibly be true. No. And we haven't even, added into the element of the Celtics having lost game 1, right? Which again, like I've talked about before, like what is the true win probability after you lose game 1? Like that urgency level, how do we sort of, mathematically factor that in? I wrote something about, from a hockey standpoint about it, but like we see it all the time in basketball with the, people call it the zigzag theory, right? Like you lose game 1, you back that team in game 2, but the market and the odds makers know that as well. And so they will shift it. And so if nobody had been injured and we had we had Miami -2, I think we would see Miami -1 in this game. And instead, we've gone from 4.5 to 3.5. But if Smart's going to play, like that means something, maybe not as much as sort of the average fan might think from a point spread standpoint. So like, to me, this is like auto, like you have to hop on the Celtics plus 3.5 money line, all of that stuff. Of course, series price plus 120.
And as I said, Smart's probable. So I don't know if does it move another half point if he is for sure in the lineup?
I would imagine so. Right. I would imagine so.
Either way, what you're saying is, I think now if you can still get them at 3.5 before, it's Smart. If you're probable, Smart is going to play, right? A guy like Marcus Smart, if he's probable to play, he's going to play. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, this is a get it while it's hot, right? Type situation. Yeah. As soon as he gets announced in, this line drops. That's just, I'd rather bet on that than the actual game, to be honest with you. But that's what we're doing, right? We're getting it at plus 3.5 before it goes to 2.5. Like that's part of betting. And like, yeah, it might not matter in a 1 game sample size, but over 1,000 bets that we are going to make in our lifetime, over thousands of bets, like this is where the difference between, being at 52 versus being at 54% and then the point spread is, right?
Yeah. And I think too, the part that interests me so much about this series is what that means adjustment wise. And a lot of things that Spo was able to throw out on Tatum, kind of the same like basketball nerd things. I was interested in watching what Kerr was throwing out at Luka, whereas like, how did they handle the pick and roll against Luka and Tatum, right? And Tatum, a lot of times he came across that pick and roll and the Heat were just blitzing him, right? So he had to give the ball up. And then now you're talking about, okay, Grant Williams, you hit your 8 threes or whatever it was in game 7. Can you do that again? And he couldn't do it again, right? Yeah. Now he might be able to do it again in game 4. But these are the things and the chess pieces and the moves that are being made. And I don't know, as a basketball nerd, I love that side of it and how that's going to play out. Because Jimmy is not going to drop 40. You know what I mean? He might have one other game like that, but he's not going to do that again. So.
And that's the point too, right? Because you mentioned, we talk about the unlikeliness of the supporting characters sort of being able to replicate something on a very next game type of basis, right? But if Jimmy Butler misses all those shots that you said, like, oh, they were tough shots, yada yada.
Very tough.
If he misses those, we talk about like what the Celtics threw at Jimmy Butler defensively. Mm-hmm. Like they threw enough. The point is they threw enough at him to force him into tough shots. Mm-hmm. He just happened to make them in that game, and vice versa. Like the Heat threw whatever it was they threw at Jason Tatum. He just didn't happen to make them. Now there are, as you know, right? Like Jason Tatum is fully capable of making those. Like the Bucks threw a bunch of stuff at Jason Tatum when he had 40 plus points against them. He just happened to make them. And that's the amazing thing about the Jimmy Butlers and Jason Tatums of the world is like, they just have games where like whatever you do defensively, like they're impervious to it, right? They are still awesome in those situations.
This is going to sound weird, but like hearing superstars talk about what happens in the NBA as you age in the league and the game just sort of slows down for you. I think that's the next level. Someone texted me and they're like, I'm so confused by Jason Tatum. One game, he looks like he's a top 5 player in the league. And then the next game, it's like, what the hell just happened? And I think in a series like this, you see the adjustment. He wasn't able to adjust to the different game plan that Heat threw at him in the second half. Whereas Jimmy Butler was like, okay, I'm going to get to the basket, right? Boston's making a bit of a run here. I'm going to get fouled and shoot free throws. That's how I'm controlling this game and pacing out this game and stopping the runs. That's just the vet nature of what you're able to do in a game. But either way, super excited to see what's going on tonight in the NBA action as we are both on the Celtics and we are differing on the Warriors and Mavs game 2, but that's okay. That's why we're here to discuss it all and discuss everything that is the NBA playoffs as that continues to just entertain me night in, night out. I'm loving this. We'll get back to the pod in a sec, but first, be a pro and win. Introducing DRF Sports all-new premium data feature on drf.com/sports. For $99 a year, which is just $8.25 a month, you can get industry-leading betting trends, angles, and analytics. With so many big sporting events here, it's the best way for you to make some money this postseason and have fun while doing it. That's DRF Sports Pro. Sign up now at drf.com/sports. But as mentioned, there's more going on in terms of playoff action as I kept seeing BOA or BOA trending. And I'm like, what the heck is, and I was like, oh, Battle of Alberta. Twitter. I see what's going on here. Okay. All right. I was slow to it. But what wasn't slow was the action going on in Calgary last night as we switch over to the NHL playoffs in round 2 in said NHL playoffs. I mean, at least talking about that series, it's just absolutely lit. 9-6, which doesn't even seem like if you're playing a video game NHL, like that's a crazy score that you're like, okay, guys, what are we doing here? Much less round 2 of the playoffs. So as we switch over to the NHL, there's only one place we can start, and it's got to be that series.
Yeah.
What? How does that happen in the playoffs? Like, who's betting on that? What was the over? What was the line? What was the puck line on that? Like, what?
Yeah, I can assure you the over was not 14 and a half, or the total, I should say, was 14 and a half. It was, it was regular, like 6.5, for a series that, I mean, fundamentally, let's take it from the top, right? Like Mike Smith just out here just wiling. Like, one of my favorite examples or my references of many, second Seinfeld reference of the show is, Jerry wondering what's going on with George's vision. He's eating onions, he's spotting dimes, right? It means like he can't see, doesn't know what to believe. And like Mike Smith, is it game ones? Is like, does my guy like need to get comfortable with the surroundings? Like as a 40-year-old as well, like, you get to a point where you're like, you know what, I'm comfortable in my own space here. I don't know, because he's played both in Edmonton for a long time and he's played in Calgary. I don't know what the deal is, right? Because he couldn't stop anything in the first 5 minutes of that game, and it took 6 minutes for him to get the boot, and you're down 3-0 if you're the Oilers. And that start, is it more about Edmonton? Is it more about Mike Smith? Because that first goal was pretty soft. Second one, was understandable. Third one was, really soft as well, sort of squeaks through under his arm. But, a lot of big goaltending is positioning, and like you can't block the entire net. And on point blank shots, like sometimes the puck just sort of squeaks through. But the point is that the high danger chances were all Calgary early in that game, right? And so, yeah, it would be nice if Mike Smith like made a save the way that he did later on in that Kings series. So again, you can go 4 or 5 games by playing great, and you can be sort of the old school version of the GOAT, right? The bad version of the GOAT for game one in both these series. And so at 5-1, I'm looking at this going like, this is, or even at 3-0, to be honest, before the like so underratedly sneaky, nasty Connor McDavid goal to make it 3-1. Like I couldn't even speak after, and it doesn't look like much to sort of the, untrained eye, if you will, but just the patience, the pivot, and sliding it underneath the goaltender. Like it literally took me 5 minutes to completely get over that. And maybe I'm not even over that goal. But the point is, at 3-0, I'm looking at this going like how much are we going to be able to decipher from this game, because you're playing at a deficit if you're Edmonton. Now, in a lot of cases, think back to the Colorado and Nashville game one, where it was the same kind of deal happened. In a lot of cases, you just go, okay, like Colorado is going to kind of sit back and sort of play preventative type defense. And the metrics are going to end up looking a little bit more favorable to the Predators. And, so it's 5-1, and then all of a sudden Edmonton actually scores on their chances. And now you've actually got a real hockey game. And so, just going over the metrics for this game, like Calgary was sort of 2/3 good, so to speak, right? Like a 66% good. Like their expected goals for was a 66% share. Their high danger chances at even strength was a 66% share. Helped Edmonton that they scored on 2 of their 6 high danger scoring chances at even strength, whereas Calgary only 1 out of 13. Now that's kind of incredible considering they scored 9 goals. I mean, obviously one of those goals was an empty net goal, and there's a couple power play goals, I believe, in there as well. And so I just look at it and I'm like, I don't think Calgary is sort of 2/3 better than Edmonton for the rest of this series, right? I don't believe that. That would suggest that they should be -200 favorites, sort of on a neutral ice situation. Are they the favorite? Should they be the favorite? Like, yes and yes, right? Like nothing happened last night that would disprove that, right? This isn't a shot quality situation or an expected goals situation where you're like, oh man, like the losing team played better. That's not what this is. It's more just like, okay, like what's the adjustment to be made based on that? And there's a couple of other examples that are actually really interesting, but we're going to fire up the old odds board here to see like what the money line is for this next game. And I'm going to sort of keep talking here so that I can find that. There it is, -175. So basically, I said like based on this information, it should be quote unquote -200. Now that would be an overreaction, but there is a reaction, right? So the Flames were about -150, -160 in this game going into it. And I believe we talked about it on Monday. We would have had to, that like there just wasn't any value on either side. right?
Yeah.
And I think this series goes 7. Nothing that happened last night necessarily changes my opinion, because I don't think just because Mike Smith got the boot in 6 minutes means that he is just a complete like Section 8 and won't be back in net and back and playing better. In fact, I would expect him to sort of, this is a guy who's a very fiery competitor. I expect him to play for this thing to encourage him, if you will, to play better going forward. And so there is an adjustment here from that minus 160 up to minus 175. I think that, it's not going all the way up to minus 200. We know that. So it's probably a fair adjustment, because I can't sit here and tell you need to back the Oilers in this next game, because they, the facts are the facts, right? They were sort of 1/3 good when it comes to driving possession. And so there's probably just not a bet here. Now, do you say to yourself, man, they just scored 15 goals. Should we be betting the over in the next game? I really wish that's how it worked. Unfortunately, that's not how it works, right? Like the next game could very well go under, and there might be that same sort of adjustment. Now, you'll still probably see a 6.5 point total. Maybe there's an adjustment on the pricing for that. Yeah. And it's right now it's minus 115 on the 6.5. So again, it's just one game. Things got a little crazy. It was really fun to watch and really quite the experience to sort of be like, the dividing line of those people who maybe didn't stay up and watch 15 minutes of a Seinfeld episode and got to sort of the other side versus those that went to sleep and this morning are like, wait, what happened in the hockey game? And even those who woke up and saw 9-6 still needed to get into the box score to see that it actually was 6-6 at one point, because 5-1 getting to 9-6, that route could be a lot of different ways. So yeah, it was an experience. I just don't know that there was anything that was clear and obvious to tell us we need to do one thing or another, because the adjustment it's probably right, getting up to minus 171, minus 175. I wouldn't be surprised if that actually fell back down a little bit, with people sort of say, okay, I went a little too far, and maybe Edmonton is a decent value in game 2.
I just don't get how Mike Smith continuously has a job every year for a playoff team, or a team with aspirations of making deep runs. That's a part to me that I don't understand. I feel like it's the same narrative every single year. And then he switched teams and it's the same thing again, where it's can Mike Smith hold up his end of the bargain? And it's no, we've seen this already. Right. What are we doing here? But anyways.
And keeps getting replaced in every, and it's it doesn't feel like it's his fault, because he's been around a really long time, and he's played for some bad teams and played well in high volume type situations, with the Phoenix Arizona Coyotes. Yeah. At the end of the day, right, it's whatever you can afford and what your better options are. And I think, to bring us to some of these other series, right, with goaltending, it's just such a crapshoot. And it's almost just they've given Mikko Koskinen every opportunity to take the job away. And I'm using Koskinen as the example because he's the human being there, but there's other guys who could come in and try to do it. But based on what we see on literally every year ever, when it comes to goaltending, it's so sketchy, man. I can give you 5 examples of guys who were amazing one year and terrible the next year. At least in this case, you're probably getting good goaltending 4 out of 7 games from Mike Smith. That's fair. And you just might be living that life of constantly going to game 7s, whether it's against really okay teams in the Kings, or really good teams in Calgary, or really great teams maybe going forward. I don't know. The devil, I guess is sort of the phrase to use here.
Fair enough. Let's get to some of these other series here, because I know there's a lot going on elsewhere in the NHL outside of the province of Alberta. But let's go with the Rangers and the Hurricanes here. What's going on in that series as we head into game 2?
Yeah, just one quick note. We should mention the updated series prices, by the way. You can get the Oilers plus 140 at plus 1.5. If there was a bet to make right now, that's the bet that I would make, because again, like Dallas, Golden State, nothing's changed for me from a large scale outlook, right? I still think that there's value on this going 7 games, and Calgary winning a home game doesn't change anything for me in that. You mentioned the Rangers and the Hurricanes. And so a couple of different elements here. One, we were really close to being able to get the Hurricanes, at an updated price, right, to win the series if they had lost 1-0 on what was not a sketchy goal necessarily, but like, listen, if Carolina is going to start the Rangers breakout with a turnover in the neutral zone that creates an odd man rush, like, yeah, the Rangers are probably going to score a goal a lot of times in that situation. This was a wild game for a game that was 1-0 for a lot of the time. And even if it had stayed 1-0, it would have been pretty wild. Shesterkin was good. You know, we talked about the idea, okay, like, he was not good enough to win that series against Pittsburgh. That series was a crazy outlier. And I try not to use the term fluke. That was a fluke series that the Rangers won, right? There's no reason. They were not the better team, from a skater standpoint. They weren't necessarily, I guess they were the better team in net, but that was only because the Penguins were on, Louis Domingue and him turning into a pumpkin eventually in that game or in that series.
Yeah.
So Shesterkin comes back and he's pretty good, but largely untested in that game. And the difference between betting a team on goaltending as an underdog versus a favorite was sort of kind of out there, right? And it's kind of what we talked about just now with Mike Smith, because goaltending is unpredictable. And so I look at it and I go, okay, like, I rather the Rangers and the hesitancy I've had with the Hurricanes. Now I've, advised betting the Hurricanes -1.5 in this series, because from a probability standpoint, they can win in Madison Square Garden, right? They play that low, they sort of play a road game in general, right? We talk about hockey teams, they play road games. They want low event type of games. And so that means Carolina, being one of the best defensive teams in the country, as though they're a college basketball team, in the National Hockey League, means that they're going to be a little bit better on the road than sort of an average team, which means their probability of winning a game 6, for example, is a little bit higher. There's also a possibility that Shesterkin just isn't going to be very good in this series, and maybe Carolina wins in 5 games, maybe they even sweep. Now, we've seen one game, and Shesterkin was pretty good. Now, one of the most interesting things that happened last night was there was a second period interview, which these player interviews are largely completely useless, right? And it's amazing that we still do them. But the reason, I guess, that we still do them is that every once in a while, a guy comes on, like, the gentleman's name escapes me, I forget who it was, but it was really more important, the content than the human being. Yeah. The second intermission, and it was one of Carolina's players, and he's like, we are awful. We are not doing what we were supposed to be doing. We are, we're supposed to be getting the puck behind their net. We're supposed to be crashing, basically the bleep out of the Rangers. We have to do that. We are going to be better in this third period. And the thing was, they were much better. They were like inspired in that third period. And it took them 18 minutes to score a goal because #hockey, right? And they ended up doing it. And of course, Aho gets the goal to tie the game. And then they get it into overtime. And listen, that goal, mega fluke, right? No one's going to say that wasn't, who knows, right? But you have to have the puck in the other team's zone in order to take advantage of those flukes, right? So that's not going to be, it's going to be a high danger chance sort of in name only, because it was a shot from sort of the slot-ish area. Yeah. That being said, right, like, there was no Carolina player in front of the net. The Rangers player did a great enough job deflecting that into the net, and of course Shesterkin died inside as soon as that puck got by him. You can tell he's like, can you believe that just happened? And so, from a Rangers offensive standpoint, like, they had a bunch of chances, man. And this is an all-time series, like, name of player series. You've got Nino Niederreiter and Capo Caco in the same series, which is outstanding. And Niederreiter hits the crossbar, and then Caco goes down the other way and misses a wide open net. And so you're like, which one of these is supposed to be a goal? Both of them are supposed to be goals, but neither of them were goals. And you end up getting a point where it's a 3.11 to 2.95 expected goals at even strength, right? So a very evenly played game, right? Okay. But also a game that should have seen 6 even strength goals and only saw 3 and needed overtime to get that third goal. Mm-hmm. So is there an opportunity here? Because I think, it's easy to look at the under, because these two teams are literally the two best in goals against, which is going to happen when you have Igor Shesterkin, and it's going to happen when you have Carolina's depth. And, what Carolina does to prevent goals is that they drive play, right? They play a lot in the offensive zone. And so when you have those two teams at the top of the goals against, you're going to see unders, right? You're going to see 5, but the number right now is 5.5 compared to Edmonton, Calgary, which is 6.5, right?
Yeah.
So like it's already built in for all of that sort of thing. And we look at that game and you go, it's 1-0 the whole way through and all yada, yada, yada. It's easy to go like, why aren't we just betting the under in this game? And why waste our time, like deal with like bounces and high danger conversions and all of that for, one side or the other. But you look at the numbers and you go, this was a 6. Right. And that's just even strength. That's not even getting into the power plays, of which, by the way, there weren't any. There was basically like one penalty on either team in this game. Now, is that a function of the officials doing the old like, oh, the boys are swallowing the whistles? Or is that a function of both these teams are all of a sudden incredibly disciplined? Right. And so the next game, are we going to get no power plays again once completely different officials are in charge? Are we going to get the same high danger chance rate and expected goals for that these teams combined for, right? And so like this is more of like a red flag on betting a couple of different things. One, it's a red flag on laying a big price with Carolina, who went into that game minus 200. Now there's nothing from the metrics that say that Carolina should be minus 200 kind of going forward. But the other red flag is like, just because it was 1-0 and these two teams are known for not giving up a ton of goals doesn't mean that you should be running to the window to bet the under in these games. You see Carolina minus 175, and I referenced the minus 210. That was the series price. And so that's why I like them minus 1.5 on that series handicap. Unfortunately, that number now gone because Carolina won that game, but we'll take it because we were already sitting on Carolina minus 1.5. And sometimes you just, it wouldn't have been great if the Rangers had won, for that minus 1.5, because obviously that means the rest of the series that Carolina has to win 4 out of 5 games for us to win that bet. But I was going to be really interested in a series price if Carolina had lost that game. So effectively, we don't really need to do anything going forward in this series. It's just more, let's not get carried away about unders in this series. And let's not get too carried away about Carolina. Though, again, if they play 3 periods, the way they played the 3rd period, then this should be, as we expected, a relatively, I don't want to say easy, but a relatively comfortable Carolina Hurricanes series victory.
So we talked about that series. We talked about the Battle of Alberta. What about the Battle of Florida? What's going on?
That's right. Yeah, we got
crazy wild series.
Yeah, we have to decide what we're going to call things, because I object to everybody just calling everything a battle of something. Okay. This is like I called it the Florida fight. I kind of thought that was really fun. I also heard like the Sunshine series, which is like, I don't think that does enough to sort of describe how much these teams do not care for each other. Game 1 evenly played. So first thing we do after game 1 is we look into, okay, what's the deal? Like how, beyond what the score was. And the score was actually really flattering for the Tampa Bay Lightning, because that was an evenly played, game 5-on-5. And like the game 7 that we talked about with Tampa and Toronto, or that series in its entirety, 2 teams play, they play really evenly. Somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose, right? And that was the issue for the Maple Leafs. Somebody had to lose that series. Handful of other series were that same way. It's hockey. That's the type of thing that's going to happen. In this case, Tampa happened to win. What did we say was going to be the big issue, right? Like the issue that killed Florida last year, the power play of Tampa Bay and staying out of the box. Shell, it took 30 seconds. It took 30 seconds for Florida to take a penalty. Like you're sitting there going like, have we learned nothing? And it's the same guy. Uyghur's out there. He's multiple penalties. He's I don't want to say the cause of, but sort of gave up one of the goals because he was sort of in no man's land from a defensive coverage standpoint. Like if this was basketball, like we'd be just absolutely ripping him for multiple days. Instead, I don't even know. Like,
I watch Le Batard every day.
Put him back out there. What are their other options?
I watch Le Batard every day, and they were crushing. Like the only reason I know who Mackenzie Uyghur is, that his name? Mackenzie?
Yeah.
The only reason I know, like, think about me talking about hockey that doesn't involve the Leafs. I only know who that is because they've spent the last day crushing him for that.
And imagine Le Batard of, you know what I mean? Like imagine anybody in the United States talking about Mackenzie Weegar. But like, that's how bad you have to be as a hockey player. I mean, like, there's 18 guys skating around, right? Like, everybody just kind of blends in a lot of cases. I shouldn't say everybody, the vast majority of players blend in, unless you're Nikita Kucherov absolutely dancing Aaron Ekblad. And so you have to have multiple things. You have to screw up multiple things to get any attention negatively in the NHL. And so, of course, Florida gives up 6 power plays, or allows 6 power plays, and Tampa converts on 3 of those 6. Now, a couple of those happening later in the game, but like, we just talked about this 40% in the series last year, and now you come back and it's 50% this time around. Like, these are things that are preventable. Like those penalties are preventable. You don't have to take those. If this was Carolina, New York, where all of a sudden, there are no penalties, discipline play, blah, 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 like, this would be a lot more interesting. Now, the problem is evenly played 5-on-5 is not good enough for Florida when you're talking about a team that is favored by, at minus 150 on the price tag, right? Even play constitutes what did we see with Tampa Bay and Toronto? Basically, it was like minus 120 home favorite. Whoever was at home was a minus 120 favorite. Like, it's just basically a coin flip pick'em type series. And like, Florida is much better than Toronto, so they should be getting the credit they are. We are seeing minus 165 minus 160 in game 2. And that is the built-in element. I talked about the piece that I wrote last week for The Score, trying to quantify what the bounce back element was, because it seemed like every team that lost the previous game in a series won the next game. And like, it was, that was hitting at like, some like 80% rate. Well, are they playing that much better? Or is this just sort of, noise, so to speak? And so that's what this adjustment is. It's going from minus 150 to minus 160 because of the bounce back element, which is basically like a 2 to 3% difference. Right. And so I'm going to be on Florida because my numbers before this series start gave Florida the edge in sort of every category, as far as like, okay, game to game edge, series price edge, minus 1.5 on the series edge, all of that sort of thing. And just because this was played at an even level, again, I don't really care that much about the power plays from a predictive standpoint. It's really more frustrating from a like after the fact standpoint. Like, you guys could and should maybe have won this game, only you gave up so many power plays that Tampa Bay couldn't help but take advantage of them. So I just look at this and I go, like, I'm not going to throw everything that, in my entire spreadsheet, like, out the window because this game was evenly played. So I'm going to be on Florida minus 160. It's going to be painful because, like, honestly, sometimes I'm watching them and I'm like, maybe Florida just stinks, but they're so deep that like the roster's so loaded and all of that sort of thing. Like, just stay out of the box. You can grab some series price at plus 120. Where that gets a little dicey is Tampa Bay does have home ice advantage now, right? Even if they lose this game and they go back to Tampa 1-1. Now, I think that Florida is more than capable of winning road games in Tampa Bay, and I say plural. That being said, like, there's just not a massive adjustment here, right? Like, plus 120 feels like we could be getting a little extra here, but that might just be the market telling us, or sort of trying to get us to not bet on Florida at a juicier series price. They're like, they want us to look at this and go, okay, it's plus 120. Yeah, it's only plus 120. Like, maybe you guys shouldn't bother doing it. Like, I think we're in lockstep with how odds makers feel about this Panthers team. Yeah, but it's just about the Panthers coming through here at some point, right? Like, the responsibility eventually is for the team to actually play to the level that they're capable of. And if they're just not going to do that, that's going to be a bummer, right? Especially when it comes to us betting on this Panthers team over and over again.
Yeah, and just really quickly here as we wrap up, there's one more series going on between the Blues and the Avs. Where's that series sitting at this point?
So, I mean, Colorado couldn't have been more dominant. I mean, I suppose they could have been more dominant. They could have been, from now and forever, I will reference Pittsburgh and New York game 4 as being the most dominant I've ever seen any team against any other team. We talked about the 20-1 high danger scoring chances, even strength. It was sort of like that. The Avs dominate, but of course, in true hockey fashion, this game goes to overtime. And so my post-game evaluation, I always go, okay, based on the metrics after the fact, nothing to do with goals scored, based on the play, how likely was one team to beat the other. So my post-game evaluation for the Avs was that they were 74% to win that game, which is pretty significant, right? You play these two teams playing 100 times. Colorado can win 74% of the time. That's pretty massive. Now, the line adjustment is to minus 245 for game 2 suggests 71%. So this is a little bit like Calgary, for example, where the line gets adjusted a little bit, but not all the way up to where the game 1 metrics sort of suggest, because there's an idea that like, okay, one team was way better than another team in game 1, but like, is that insanely high level replicable for game 2? So like, we're going to make an adjustment based on the odds for it, but we're also not going to assume that like Colorado's just going to dominate play over and over and over again. You and I talked about like the key element for the Blues here and them trying to keep this series interesting. Obviously, you know, over 5.5 games, St. Louis plus 1.5, something along those lines. Not even saying that the upset was sort of coming, was Jordan Binnington. Because the Blues' issue this season has been goaltending. Binnington didn't even start the playoffs because he wasn't good enough over the course of the regular season to do so. And Binnington was incredible. Now, are we going to rely on him being that good from a game-to-game standpoint? Like, you can't, but at least he's been like awesome. And so we can kind of expect very good or sort of old form Jordan Binnington, but we need the Blues to play better here. And so if they play better, that takes, you know, sort of percentage points of difficulty of Jordan Binnington, you know, off of his life, right? Like if St. Louis is 10% better, then Jordan Binnington has to make 10% less difficult saves. You know what I mean? So they sort of have to meet in the middle here a little bit to get back to where we were. Now, we talked about game 1 being a fair price at minus 220 for the Colorado Avalanche. And now that we're looking at a minus 240 type zone, now we're getting into a little bit overpriced. Now, I'm still not looking to bet St. Louis. We talked about how we're going to wait and see, right? We're going to take a wait and see approach. We're going to hope St. Louis steals one of the first 2 games. We're going to grab the money line in game 3. So like that will happen between now and the next time we talk. So it doesn't really matter what happens in this next game. St. Louis on the money line in game 3 is going to be a bet. And so hopefully the Blues collectively improve. This is a veteran team that is deep, has a ton of talent, all of those sort of caveats. And like, they should improve. And hopefully that means a more competitive game from a 5-on-5 standpoint. Now, all that is to say, maybe the Blues just blew their opportunity, getting that game to overtime in a game they had no business winning. Overtime, they basically never had the puck. I think shots were like 10-0 in overtime. So like they didn't even, you know, sniff a concept of taking advantage of this. The one thing I will say about the Colorado Avalanche at this point is people are literally just coming, you know, out of the woodwork here to praise the Avalanche. Through 5 games of the postseason last year, people were wondering not only like, first of all, you know, this who can beat this team 4 games in 7? That was the question. Like, how can anybody beat this team in 4 games, you know, 4 times in 7 games? Then people are also saying, like, I don't know that they're going to lose 4 games the rest of the playoffs. Like, this team is a juggernaut. And that was off of a 7-1 victory against the Vegas Golden Knights in game 1 of that series. So, like, as we get super excited about this Colorado Avalanche team, we have to remember that we were in this exact same place last year when they hammered the Vegas Golden Knights. Game 2 went to overtime. Colorado won that game as well. They were 6-0 in the playoffs. They never won another game in the playoffs. The Golden Knights took 4 straight. That series was over in 6. By the time you got to game 5 of that series, you wondered how Colorado could score because Vegas was dominating that to that point. Now you say, okay, well, that was Vegas. Like, they're a really good team, blah, blah, blah. So the St. Louis Blues have just as good of a resume over the last 3 to 4 years as the Golden Knights. And that Stanley Cup banner that's hanging in the rafters of whatever they're calling the St. Louis Arena at this point, that would suggest that they have a better resume than the Vegas Golden Knights. The fact that the Vegas Golden Knights, again, this is a team we're talking about in the playoffs last year, who went on to lose to the Montreal Canadiens, who went on to miss the playoffs this year. A couple of different, obviously, elements to that team. But like, why would I think that the Blues are that much worse than the Golden Knights if we sort of do that comparison? So the point is like, let's not get too carried away. Now, maybe this is that season. Maybe this is that year for the Colorado Avalanche, right? God knows these guys have been around long enough. The Rantanens, the Landeskog's, of course, the McKinnons, Makar to a lesser extent. And obviously their goaltending is better potentially. Again, goaltending's super fleeting, but the goaltending's potentially better than it has been in previous years. I just want to make sure everybody remembers where we were, where the Colorado Avalanche were the heavy favorites to win the Stanley Cup after 5 and 6 games of the postseason last year, only for it to fall apart. Just making that point. Now, the series price plus 500 for the Blues here, that's still probably not enough for me to get behind this. Based on the fact that they were outplayed as drastically as they were, I would have liked that to have obviously been closer to 50-50 for me to believe, really truly believe that the Blues can win this series. But again, I have them winning this series 4-2 at 10-1. That has a lot more to do with the 10-1 than it does the 4-2, right? If the Blues were to pull the upset, I think they would have to do it before Game 7. Now they, you look at it and you go, they got to win 4 out of the next 5. I'm just saying, Vegas did that last year. They did it in 4 straight. So not all hope is lost, so to speak, but I would like to see a little bit better than plus 500. We'll wait for Game 3 to be on the Blues at a plus money price, right? We're going to get that plus money home underdog price on the Blues, and that's where we're going to attack this series.
Well, we always love plus money, and we always love having you stop by to break down the whole grain goodness that is the playoffs in both the NHL and NBA. My dude, where can people find you when they want to hear more info from what you got, man?
Yeah, man, at MRUS Authentic, MRUSS Authentic. We're going to be sweating out some PGA here, just watching it sort of as it happens here, watching Hideki Matsuyama parring the first couple of holes. Does that mean he's going to win? I think probably. No. Going to be sweating out live bets on Twitter there. So I've, wrote a couple of different pieces about the PGA Championship that you can check out, even if that informs your live betting, which of course we're going to be doing this weekend, assuming this tournament is as exciting as I think it could be. People are raving about the golf course at this point. So it should be really, really fun. And then I'm going to write today about in-series betting, basically what we've talked about here as far as like, okay, are there series bets to be made based off of what has happened in these games? And then, of course, like I said, we got a long weekend, so we're going to have a little fun this weekend as well.
Sounds good, my dude. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll catch up down the line.
Thanks, man.
And if you want to follow me online, you can do so on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander and on Twitter at Shell Alexander. Don't forget to like and subscribe to DRF Sports Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also rate us, review us, like us, all that other fun stuff. But for more from this new project from DRF Sports, just a little reminder. If you're unfamiliar with the letters DRF, it stands for Daily Racing Forum, which has been around for over 100 years, giving you all of the horse racing information, data, and analysis. But now we've taken over the entire sports world. So if you want coverage on every football game, as well as the NBA, MLB, college sports, and more, head to drf.com/sports for all of the details and insights, as the site has all of the data on every game, including offensive and defensive stats, betting angles, line movements, key injuries, team stats, and more. The DRF data is what powers our power trends. So if you want to see which trends our analysts have selected, follow us on Instagram and on Twitter. If you want access to all of the raw data, drf.com/sports. That's where you can find the usual previews as we deep dive into the games. And of course, we've got you covered on this podcast. However you want your betting information, we've got you covered. Again, my name is Sheldon Alexander. That's all I got for now. But until next time, see ya.
Thanks for listening to the DRF Sports Podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. For more sports betting advice, go to drf.com/sports and follow on Twitter at DRF_sports.